A rancher's pride. An arrogant rancher bets $1 million that no one can tame his wild mule. The entire town watches the challenge, certain it will be yet another failed attempt. But when a young black boy appears in the arena, something inexplicable happens before everyone's eyes. And what seemed like just a bet becomes the beginning of a transformation no one imagined. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The sun beat down mercilessly on the small town of Golden Ridge, rural Texas, where time seemed to move more slowly than the creek that cut through the lands of Horizon Ranch. Colonel Gerald Morrison, a 60-year-old man whose face expressed the hardness of someone who always got what he wanted, observed his properties from the porch of the main house. Nobody has ever tamed that damned mule. Nobody. He bellowed to Tom, the foreman who had faithfully accompanied him for more than 20 years. The beast is impossible, boss. I've already sent 3 ranch hands to the hospital. Gerald smiled with a perverse pleasure. The animal known as Thunder was famous in the region for its ferocity. At that moment, an idea crossed his mind. Let's do this, Tom. Announce in the surrounding areas that I'm offering $50,000 to anyone who can ride that mule for more than 5 minutes. It'll be quite a spectacle. That same day, in a small adobe house on the outskirts of town, Tyler, a 12-year-old boy, was taking care of his grandmother, Josephine, an elderly woman with white hair and hands calloused from hard work. Their life was one of scarcity but abundant in affection. "Grandma, I earned $5 today helping Mr. Mario at the store," said the boy, handing the coins to the elderly woman. Josephine smiled, hiding her concern. The medicine for her, arthritis, cost much more than that, but she would never diminish the brightness in her grandson's eyes. "You are the blessing of my life, my child." Tyler had a special gift. Since he was little, he could silently communicate with animals. It wasn't anything supernatural, just heightened sensitivity, infinite patience, and genuine respect for all creatures. The next morning, the news of Colonel Gerald's challenge spread like wildfire through dry straw. The town was buzzing with comments about the extravagant bet. $50,000, that's enough to buy a house, commented one of the patrons at Joe's Tavern. But the price is too high. They say the last one who tried was bedridden for 3 weeks, replied another. Tyler, who was delivering a package to the tavern, heard the conversation with interest. $50,000 would solve all his and his grandmother's problems. They could buy medicines, food, even a better house. On the way back, Tyler diverted his route. He followed a rarely used trail that led to the back of Horizon Ranch. Hidden among bushes, he observed the famous mule in the pasture. The animal was truly imposing. Shiny black coat, proud bearing, and eyes that seemed to reflect an ancient Tame. Instead of fear, Tyler felt compassion. There was something in those eyes that went beyond fury. It was pain, incomprehension. The boy returned the next day, and the day after, always discreet, just observing. On the 4th day, he brought an apple and left it near the fence. From the veranda of the main house, Mrs. Helen, Colonel Gerald's sister, observed the unusual movement of curious people coming to spy on the mule. A 50-year-old woman, she had lived in her brother's shadow since she was widowed young. Her marriage had been arranged, her life controlled, her voice silenced. That afternoon she noticed something different. A slender boy stealthily approaching the fence. Instead of alerting her brother, Helen felt an unusual curiosity. There was something familiar about that small figure that awakened long-dormant memories. "Who are you talking to, Helen?" Gerald's voice sounded behind her, making her start. "No one, just observing the movement. Your challenge is attracting a lot of people. And it will attract even more on Sunday. I've already confirmed with the mayor, the judge, all the important men in the region. It will be an unforgettable spectacle," he boasted, not noticing that his sister had gone back to observing the boy who was now moving away across the field. Helen felt a tightness in her chest. Something about that boy troubled her, as if he were a page from a book she had refused to read long ago. She decided she needed to discover who he was before Sunday arrived with its spectacle of arrogance and cruelty. The days leading up to the great challenge passed quickly. Tyler continued his secret visits to the mule at Horizon Ranch, increasingly confident that there was a special connection between them. On Friday, he achieved something extraordinary. The animal accepted his touch between the slats of the fence. "You're not violent, you're just scared," whispered Tyler as the mule snorted softly as if responding. That same afternoon, upon returning home, he found Grandma Josephine sitting on the doorstep with a worried expression. "Where have you been, child? I've been needing your help with the garden." Tyler hesitated, but couldn't lie to the only person who had always stood by him. "Grandma, I'm going to participate in Colonel Gerald's challenge. I'm going to ride Thunder." Josephine's face paled. Her trembling hands held Tyler's with urgency. "Don't do this, my child. That ranch, that man, that—" Her voice failed, as if the words carried a weight greater than she could bear. "What about him, Grandma? Do you know the Colonel?" The elderly woman looked away, lost in painful memories. "I know enough to know we shouldn't get involved with those people. Promise me you won't go." But Tyler had already made his decision. His grandmother's medicine was running out, bills were piling up, and winter was approaching. He needed to try. Meanwhile, at Horizon Ranch, Helen watched from her bedroom window the movement of the ranch hands, preparing the arena for Sunday's event. Her brother had invited the local high society, transforming a simple challenge into a social event full of arrogance and ostentation. The mayor confirmed his presence, as did Judge Azevedo, commented Gerald, entering his sister's room without knocking. "It will be the event of the year in Golden Ridge." Helen merely nodded, keeping her eyes fixed on the landscape outside. Her thoughts were on the boy she had seen days ago. There was something disturbing about his face, his posture. "You seem distant, Helen. What are you looking at out there?" questioned Gerald, approaching the window. "Nothing specific, just thinking." "About what?" "About Claire." The name fell like a stone in the room. Claire, the niece whom Gerald had expelled from the ranch 15 years ago for falling in love with a black worker on the property. The young woman who had defied all social conventions and paid far too high a price. "Don't mention that name in this house," shouted Gerald, banging his fist against the wall. "She ceased to be part of this family the moment she dishonored our name." Helen faced her brother, feeling a long-dormant courage awakening in her chest. "And if she had a child, Gerald, have you ever thought about that?" The man turned pale. The possibility had never crossed his mind. "Impossible." "We would have known." "How?" "You forbade anyone from mentioning her name. You expelled her with nothing, pregnant, far from everything she knew." Gerald left the room, visibly disturbed. Helen remained motionless, watching the dust her brother had raised upon leaving. She knew she had touched a wound that had never completely healed. The next morning, contrary to all the rules imposed by her brother, Helen left the ranch alone for the first time in years. She took the car she rarely used and drove to town, determined to find the boy she had seen at the property's edge. Golden Ridge was small enough for everyone to know each other. At the Central Market, she found Mrs. Sophie, the region's oldest seamstress. "I'm looking for a boy, Mrs. Sophie. Thin, dark skin, must be about 12 years old, always walks alone." The seamstress frowned, suspicious of the sudden curiosity. "From the Colonel's sister. Why do you want to know?" "It's important, please." Something in Helen's voice must have convinced the seamstress, who responded in a low tone. "Must be Tyler, Josephine's grandson. They live in a small house near the creek south exit of town. The boy has been doing odd jobs around here since he was little. His grandmother is the only family he has." Helen felt her heart race. The name Josephine brought forth an old memory, the maid who had helped Claire when she became pregnant, the same one Gerald had fired mercilessly after his niece's departure. That same moment, Tyler was in the town square observing the preparations for Sunday. Posters announced the great challenge, and groups of people excitedly commented on who would have the courage to face the fearsome mule. Sunday dawned with a sky of an almost painful blue. Horizon Ranch had been transformed into an improvised stage with rustic stands built around a circular arena. Colorful pennants fluttered in the wind, contrasting with the tension that hung in the air. Colonel Gerald, dressed in his best suit, received important guests on the veranda of the main house. The mayor, the judge, ranchers from the region, all gathered to watch the spectacle that promised entertainment at the expense of others' failure. "It's very presumptuous for anyone to think they can tame that animal," commented the mayor, sipping an expensive whiskey. "But the prize is tempting." "Exactly," replied Gerald with an arrogant laugh. "50,000 that will never leave my pocket." Helen observed everything with growing discomfort. After her visit to town the previous day, she hadn't been able to locate Josephine and Tyler's house. Now, with the event about to begin, she felt an unease she couldn't explain. In the small house by the creek, Tyler was getting ready with the best clothes he had, a faded but clean blue shirt and jeans that were already too short for his growing legs. "There's still time to give up on this madness," begged Josephine, holding her grandson's hands in hers. "Trust me, Grandma. Thunder and we understand each other." The elderly woman closed her eyes, as if seeking strength from somewhere distant. "Then take this," she said, removing from her neck a cord with a small carved wooden pendant. "It was your mother's. She always said it gave her protection." Tyler accepted the gift with reverence. He had never known his mother, who, according to his grandmother, had departed this world when he was only 2 years old. His father, never mentioned, was a faceless shadow in his imagination. "Thank you, Grandma." When he arrived at the ranch, the event had already begun. The crowd was gathering around the arena, where a strong young man was trying unsuccessfully to approach the mule. Thunder reared, whinnied, and backed away, his injected eyes expressing a fury that seemed to grow with each new attempt. "It's impossible," shouted the young man, giving up after nearly being hit by a kick. The audience laughed and mocked, while Gerald watched everything with poorly disguised satisfaction. It was then that he noticed the slender boy approaching the arena. "What do we have here?" he mocked. "Another candidate to fly through the air?" Laughter echoed, but ceased when the boy looked Gerald directly in the eyes, without fear. There was something in that look that disturbed the rancher. "I want to try," said Tyler, with a calmness that contrasted with the mockery around him. "Your name, boy?" "Tyler Johnson." "Well, Tyler Johnson, the mule is there. $50,000 if you can ride it for 5 minutes. But I warn you that I'm not responsible for broken bones," provoked Gerald, causing a new wave of laughter. Helen, who was watching from the veranda, felt her heart stop when she saw the boy. It was him, the same one she had seen spying on the property days ago. She approached the balustrade, unable to look away. Tyler entered the arena with slow, confident steps. The crowd fell silent, watching with morbid curiosity. The mule, which had previously charged at anyone who approached, remained motionless, its ears attentive in the boy's direction. "Hello, friend," murmured Tyler, slowly extending his hand. Thunder snorted, but didn't back away. The boy continued approaching, speaking in a low voice, words that no one else could hear. When he was a few steps from the animal, everyone held their breath, expecting the violent attack. But the attack didn't come. Instead, the mule slightly lowered its head, allowing Tyler to touch its muzzle. A murmur of astonishment ran through the audience. "It's some kind of trick," someone shouted. "The colonel tamed the beast beforehand." Gerald, astonished, couldn't articulate a response. He knew very well that no one had ever managed to touch that animal without being attacked. With smooth movements, Tyler continued to caress the mule, which seemed increasingly calm. Then, to everyone's amazement, he placed his hands on the animal's back and hoisted himself up, mounting without saddle or bridle. A sepulchral silence took over the place. Thunder remained still for a few seconds, as if assessing the situation, and then began to walk calmly around the circle of the arena, with Tyler firmly mounted on its back. "The stopwatch," someone remembered, breaking the silence. Tom, the foreman, looked at his watch, but was so perplexed that he had forgotten to start it. 5 minutes? At least 3 must have already passed. Helen quickly descended the veranda stairs, approaching the arena. Now she could clearly see the boy's face, and what she saw made her bring her hand to her mouth to stifle a cry. Those eyes, that face shape. It was like looking at Claire 15 years ago. After the stipulated 5 minutes had passed, Tyler continued mounted on the mule, which now seemed completely tame under his command. The crowd, previously mocking, now applauded in a mixture of admiration and incredulity. That's enough," shouted Gerald, approaching the arena with his face contorted with rage. "You can get down now, boy." Tyler slid off the fay. Animals back with the same smoothness with which he had mounted. Thunder remained close to him, like a newly appointed guardian. "I won the challenge," said the boy, facing the rancher. "I rode for more than 5 minutes." Gerald looked around, noticing the gazes of the crowd. Many were filming with their cell phones, and the mayor was observing the scene with peculiar interest. He couldn't simply deny payment in front of so many witnesses. "You used some trick. You must have drugged the animal," he accused, looking for a way out. "No, sir," replied Tyler calmly. "I just talked to him." "Talk? With a mule?" Gerald laughed forcibly, seeking support from the audience, but few joined him. "That's ridiculous." "My brother," Helen intervened, approaching. "The boy won fair and square. Everyone here witnessed it." It was the first time in years that Helen had confronted him publicly. Gerald stared at her, surprised by that sudden display of courage. "Stay out of this, Helen," he hissed between his teeth. But she didn't back down. Something inside her had awakened upon seeing that boy, a strength she thought had been extinguished long ago. "You offered $50,000 to whoever could tame the mule. He did it in front of everyone. Honor your word, Gerald." A murmur of agreement ran through the crowd. The colonel realized he was cornered. With a brusque gesture, he ordered Tom, "Bring the money from the office." While Tom was walking away, Tyler approached the mule again, caressing its neck as if thanking it for its trust. It was at this moment that Helen noticed the carved wooden pendant the boy carried around his neck. Her heart raced. That pendant, she would recognize it anywhere. It had been a gift she had given to Claire years ago, a charm that, according to family tradition, should be passed from mother to son. "Where did that pendant come from?" she asked, her voice trembling. Tyler looked at her with curiosity. "It was my mother's. My grandmother gave it to me today for good luck." "Your grandmother? What's her name?" "Josephine Johnson." Helen felt her legs weaken. Josephine, the former maid who had been like a second mother to Claire. The same one who had disappeared after his niece was expelled from the ranch. "And your mother, what was her name?" "Claire," replied the boy, surprised by the woman's interest. "But I didn't know her. She left when I was 2 years old." The crowd was beginning to disperse, while Tom returned with an envelope. Helen felt she needed to act quickly before Gerald returned. "Tyler, I need to talk to you and your grandmother. It's important." The boy observed her, distrustful. "Why?" "Because I think—" Helen hesitated, aware of the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. "I think I know your story better than you imagine." At that moment, Gerald returned, snatching the envelope from Tom's hands. "Here it is," he said, handing the money to Tyler with visible reluctance. "Now get off my property." The boy accepted the envelope, still disturbed by the conversation with Helen. As he turned to leave, he gave Thunder one last pat, who responded with a soft whinny. "The mule stays," ordered Gerald. "He's not your prisoner," replied Tyler, surprising everyone with the firmness in his voice. "If he wants to follow me, I won't stop him." As if understanding every word, Thunder stepped forward, positioning himself beside the boy. Gerald advanced, furious, but was detained by Helen. "Let them go, Gerald. You've caused enough damage, sir." "What are you talking about?" he asked, confused by his sister's attitude. "You know very well what I'm talking about, or rather, who I'm talking about." The guests had already withdrawn, taking with them comments about the extraordinary event of that afternoon. Only a few employees remained, keeping their distance, but attentive to the discussion between the siblings. "That boy," continued Helen, with a courage that surprised herself, "is Claire's son." Gerald turned pale. impossible. The pendant around his neck. It's the same one I gave Claire on her 15th birthday. And he is the spitting image of her, Gerald. How did you not notice? The rancher staggered, leaning on a nearby fence. The possibility that the boy was really his great-nephew was too disturbing to ignore. Even if it's true, what does it matter? Claire dishonored this family. Her son has no place here. Helen looked at him with an expression that mixed pity and contempt. I'm going to discover the whole truth, Gerald. And when I do, things are going to change around here. By nightfall, Helen drove to the small house by the creek where Josephine and Tyler lived. The dirt road was slippery due to the rain that had fallen hours before, but she was too determined to care about obstacles. When she arrived, she found Tyler sitting on the porch, animatedly counting the money he had earned, while Thunder calmly grazed on the small plot of land next to the house. The mule had really followed him all the way from the ranch, like a faithful dog accompanying its owner. "Good evening," Helen greeted, getting out of the car. Tyler stood up, surprised. Josephine appeared at the door, holding a dish towel in her wrinkled hands. Her eyes widened when she recognized the visitor. "Mrs. Helen." The elderly woman's voice came out almost as a whisper. "Hello, Josephine, it's been a long time." The two women stared at each other for a long moment, decades of untold history hanging between them. "What are you doing here?" asked Josephine. Finally, her tone defensive. "We need to talk about Claire, about Tyler." Josephine paled but maintained her composure. With a gesture, she invited Helen in. The house was small but impeccably clean. Framed photographs decorated the adobe walls, and an aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the environment. "Tyler, go feed Thunder," Josephine requested, clearly wanting to remove her grandson from the conversation that was about to take place. "But, Grandma, I want to know what she has to say about my mother," protested the boy. "We'll talk later, now go." Reluctantly, Tyler left, casting a last curious glance at Helen. The two women sat at the simple kitchen table. Josephine served coffee in cups of old china, her hands slightly trembling. "So," began Helen, "Tyler is Claire's son." It wasn't a question, but Josephine nodded anyway. "And the father?" "Michael, he worked at your ranch. He left for San Francisco after Claire was expelled. We never heard from him again." Helen closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the confirmation of what she already suspected. "Why did you never reach out to us?" "Tyler is family, Josephine. He has the right to know his origins." The elderly woman let out a bitter laugh. "Family. Gerald expelled Claire when she was pregnant, with nothing but the clothes on her back. He called her names I dare not repeat. What kind of family turns its back on a daughter when she needs it most?" "I didn't know she was pregnant," confessed Helen, the guilt evident in her voice. "When I realized Gerald had expelled her, I tried to find her, but it was as if she had disappeared. That was the plan. Claire knew that if she stayed nearby, Gerald would continue to persecute her. We left the state, went to New Mexico. We only returned to Golden Ridge after she..." Josephine didn't complete the sentence. The heavy silence that followed said everything. "How did it happen?" asked Helen in a low voice. "Complications during childbirth. The doctors did everything possible, but..." Josephine took a deep breath. "She managed to hold Tyler in her arms for 2 years. She loved that boy more than anything. When she felt she wouldn't survive, she made me promise I would raise him away from the Morrisons' influence. She said she preferred him to grow up poor, but with dignity, than to be molded by Gerald's greed and prejudice." Helen let tears flow freely down her face. "I loved her like a daughter, Josephine. I should have done more, should have stopped Gerald, should have..." "The past doesn't change, Mrs. Helen. We can only look forward." Outside, Tyler was stroking Thunder, but his attention was on the conversation he was trying to overhear through the slightly open window. Fragments of phrases reached him, revealing parts of a story that had never been completely told to him. Back at Horizon Ranch, Gerald was rifling through old documents in his office, seized by an anxiety he hadn't felt in years. His father's will, who had died 2 decades ago, contained a clause that few knew about. Any heir who practiced acts of discrimination would lose the right to the property. At the time, it seemed just an insignificant detail, but now, the office door opened abruptly, Tom entered, breathless. "Boss, there's a problem. Dr. August is here." "August? The lawyer? What does he want at this hour?" "I don't know, but he's accompanied by some people from town. They seem agitated." Gerald stood up, concerned. August Fisher was the lawyer who had handled his father's estate. If he was here at that hour of the night, the subject could only be one. Upon reaching the main room, he found a group of about 10 people, among them Joe from the tavern, Mrs. Sophie the seamstress, and other long-time residents of Golden Ridge. In the center, August Fisher, a 60-year-old man, carried a folder of documents. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded Gerald. "Good evening, Colonel," greeted August with formality. "We've come to discuss an urgent matter about your father's will, Colonel Anthony Morrison, and about your great-nephew, Tyler Johnson." Gerald turned pale upon hearing the lawyer's words. For a few seconds, silence dominated the room, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. "How did you find out?" he finally asked, his voice trembling with contained anger. "Golden Ridge is small, Colonel," replied August, adjusting his glasses on his nose. "The news that a boy tamed the untamable thunder spread like wildfire. When we found out who the boy was, the pieces started to fall into place." Mrs. Sophie, the seamstress, stepped forward. "I always knew that boy had Morrison blood. He has the same eyes as Ms. Claire, may God rest her soul." "And why would this be any of your business?" Gerald recovered some of his usual arrogance. "Whether the boy is my relative or not, what does that have to do with this invasion of my property?" August opened the folder he carried and removed a document yellowed by time. "This is a certified copy of your father's will, Colonel Anthony Morrison. In the 17th clause, it clearly states, 'Any heir who practices discriminatory acts against family members or employees will automatically lose the right to the property, which will be transferred to the next heir in the line of succession.'" Gerald snatched the document from the lawyer's hands, reading frantically. "This is ridiculous. This clause never existed." "It did, and it does, Colonel. You yourself signed it when you accepted the terms of the will 20 years ago." Gerald's expression alternated between disbelief and fury. His mind worked quickly, looking for a way out of that unexpected situation. "And what exactly are you accusing me of? Of having expelled my niece from home? She dishonored the family name. Any father would have done the same." Joe from the tavern cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "It's not just that, Colonel. We know that you had Ms. Claire persecuted even after she left. You spread lies about her in the region so that no one would help her." "Slander!" shouted Gerald, advancing threateningly. "I have witnesses," August intervened calmly. "Your former foreman, Sebastian, confessed on his deathbed that you ordered him and other men to threaten anyone who offered help to Claire. And we have the testimonies of 3 former employees who confirm the threats." Gerald's face contorted into a mask of hatred. "This is a conspiracy. You have no proof." "Actually, we do," said a female voice from the door. Everyone turned. Helen was entering the room, accompanied by Josephine and Tyler. The boy seemed frightened by the whole situation, but maintained an upright posture, a silent dignity that was very reminiscent of Claire. "Helen, what is the meaning of this?" Gerald vociferated. "It means it's time for the truth, my brother," she replied with a calmness that surprised everyone. "For 15 years I've kept quiet, watching you transform this ranch into a monument to your arrogance. No more." Helen approached Tyler, gently placing her hands on his shoulders. "This is Tyler Johnson, son of Claire Morrison and Michael Johnson. My great-nephew and legitimate heir of the Morrisons." Gerald let out a forced laugh. "Even if it's true, which is not proven, the boy has no right whatsoever. Claire was disinherited when she left this house." "Claire was never officially disinherited," August corrected. "You expelled her, but never formalized the disinheritance. By law, she remained a Morrison heir until the day of her departure, and, by extension, her son is as well." A dangerous gleam appeared in Gerald's eyes. "Everyone get out of my house." "Now!" he shouted, advancing threateningly. That's when a powerful whinny echoed, followed by the sound of hooves against the floorboards. Thunder entered the room, imposing, positioning himself beside Tyler like a guardian. The animal stared at Gerald, nostrils flared as if perfectly understanding the threat the man represented. "Even that damned animal has turned against me," muttered Gerald, backing away slightly. "Animals sense who has a pure heart," said Josephine, speaking for the first time since she entered. Tyler always had that gift, just like his mother. Helen took a deep breath, gathering courage for what would come next. "Gerald, we are here to inform you that according to our father's will, you have lost the right to Horizon Ranch due to your discriminatory acts against Claire and her son. As next in the line of succession, I will temporarily assume the administration until Tyler reaches legal age." A stunned silence followed the declaration. Gerald seemed to have been hit by a physical blow, staggering slightly. "You can't do this. This ranch is mine. I built everything you see here. With the sweat and blood of workers you exploited and humiliated," August completed. "I also have documents here that prove various labor irregularities over the years. It would be a long, painful process, Colonel. I suggest you accept the terms we're going to propose." Tyler looked at the scene, astonished. In less than a day, he had discovered he was heir to one of the largest ranches in the region, that his great-uncle had persecuted his mother until expelling her from home, and that his family history was much more complex and painful than he had ever imagined. The next morning dawned with an atmosphere of expectation in Golden Ridge. The news about the events at Horizon Ranch spread quickly, creating a buzz that took over every corner, every business in the small town. Tyler, Josephine, and Helen had spent the night in a small guest room at the ranch, while Gerald had locked himself in his quarters, refusing to speak to anyone. Lawyer. August had also remained, to ensure there would be no immediate retaliation. "How do you feel?" asked Helen to Tyler, as they had breakfast in the kitchen of the main house. The boy looked around at the expensive utensils, the imposing furniture, everything so different from the simplicity he was used to. "Strange," he answered honestly. "Yesterday I was just Mrs. Josephine's grandson. Today everyone says I'm heir to all this." Josephine squeezed her grandson's hand affectionately. "You're still the same boy, my child. What changed was just what others see in you." Helen smiled, moved by the elderly woman's simple wisdom. "Your grandmother is right, Tyler, and I want you to know that regardless of what happens with this ranch, you and Josephine are my family. I should have looked for you before, should have insisted more on finding Claire. Forgive me for that." Silent tears ran down Josephine's wrinkled face. "Mrs. Helen, you were always good, different from your brother. Claire knew that. She talked a lot about the aunt who gave her the protection pendant." Tyler instinctively touched the small wooden charm he carried around his neck. "I wish I had known my mother," he murmured. "Sometimes I have dreams where she tells me stories. Are they just dreams or—" "They're memories, my child," replied Josephine, emotional. "Claire used to tell you stories every night, even when you were a baby. She said one day you would remember them." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Tom, the foreman. He seemed uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Mrs. Helen, the workers are gathered outside. They want to know what will happen to them." Helen stood up, adjusting her posture. "Tell them that no one will lose their job. On the contrary, we are starting a new phase at Horizon Ranch. Talk to them, Tom. Find out what their biggest concerns are, what needs to be improved. I want a meeting with everyone early tomorrow." The man nodded, visibly relieved, and withdrew. Helen turned to Tyler. "Would you like to see the property? After all, someday all this will be yours." The boy hesitated. "Can I bring thunder?" Helen smiled. "Of course, I think he has already proven he has every right to be wherever he wants on this ranch." Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Gerald watched from the window the movement of workers in the yard. His face was haggard, his eyes bloodshot from someone who hadn't slept. Decades of absolute control were slipping through his fingers like fine sand, and he didn't know how to react. A soft knock on the door interrupted his somber thoughts. "Come in," he ordered dryly. August Fisher entered, carrying a folder of documents. His countenance was serious but not hostile. "Good morning, Colonel. I hope you've reflected on our conversation yesterday." Gerald looked back out the window. Down below, he could see Tyler mounted on Thunder, touring the ranch fields, in Helen's company. "What do you want from me, August? Isn't it enough to take everything I've built?" The lawyer approached, placing the folder on a nearby table. "No one wants to take what's yours, Colonel, just to re-establish what's fair. I bring a proposal that might be interesting for everyone." "What proposal?" "The ranch will be administered by Helen until Tyler turns 18. You will maintain the right of residence in the main house and receive a monthly pension corresponding to 20% of the property's profits." Gerald let out a bitter laugh. "What else? You'll want me to publicly apologize too?" "That won't be necessary, but there is one condition. You must officially recognize Tyler as your great-nephew and legitimate heir of the Morrisons." The man stared at the lawyer, his expression inscrutable. "And if I refuse?" "Then we'll have to go the legal route. Your father's will is clear, and we have sufficient evidence of discriminatory acts. Besides, as I mentioned yesterday, there are various labor irregularities that could come to light. It would be a long, draining process and, frankly, unnecessary." Gerald looked back out the window. Tyler had now stopped Thunder near a group of workers who surrounded him with curiosity and growing respect. The boy smiled, chatting animatedly, without any trace of the arrogance that would be expected from someone in his new position. "He looks like her," muttered Gerald almost to himself. "Like Claire? Yes, everyone says that." "No, like our mother. The same determined gaze, the same silent dignity. Claire had that too." "August," observed the old rancher with renewed interest. Perhaps there was more complexity to this man than everyone supposed. "So, Colonel, what do you decide?" Gerald turned, facing the lawyer with an expression that mixed defeat and something close to relief. "Bring the papers for me to sign, but I have one condition. I want to speak with the boy, alone." The news that Gerald had accepted the proposed terms caused a mixture of surprise and relief. Helen, Josephine, and August were discussing the practical details of the transition when Tom arrived with the message. "The boss, Colonel Gerald, wants to speak with the boy. Alone." Josephine stood up, alarmed. "No way. I don't trust that man near my grandson." Helen placed her hand on the elderly woman's arm. "I understand your concern, Josephine, but I think we should allow it. Gerald has already accepted the terms. He has nothing to gain by creating more problems now." "What? If it's some kind of trick?" insisted Josephine. Tyler, who had been observing the conversation in silence, spoke up. "I want to go, Grandma. I need to really know him, not just what they say about him." There was a surprising maturity in the boy's words. Josephine looked at her grandson with a mixture of pride and concern. "You're just like your mother, stubborn as she was," she said with a sad smile. "Go then, but we'll be here, waiting." Tyler climbed the stairs of the main house with determined steps, although his heart was beating fast. He stopped before the imposing carved wooden door and knocked twice. "Enter," ordered Gerald's grave voice. The room was in half darkness, with the curtains partially closed. The old rancher was sitting in a leather armchair near the window, a half-empty glass of whiskey on the small table beside him. He seemed to have aged 10 years in a single night. "Come closer, boy," he said, indicating a nearby chair. Tyler obeyed, sitting with his back straight, looking the man directly in the eyes. "You have courage, I recognize that," commented Gerald, after a moment of silence. "So you don't lower your eyes like the others. My grandmother taught me to look people in the eyes. She says that's how you know someone's character." Gerald smiled slightly, the first genuine smile in many days. Josephine was always a wise woman, stubborn but wise. Another moment of silence. Gerald observed the boy intensely, as if looking for something in his features. "You look like her," he finally said. "Like Claire, you have the same eyes." "Did you love her?" asked Tyler directly. The question surprised Gerald. His eyes clouded. Momentarily. "Claire was special. She grew up in this house like a daughter to me after my younger sister passed away. I had plans for her. A marriage with the son of the largest rancher in the neighboring region. An alliance that would strengthen the Morrison name." But she fell in love with my father, completed Tyler. Michael Johnson, the name came out, like a tired sigh. An ordinary worker, without a name, without possessions. I couldn't understand how Claire could throw everything away for him. For love, said Tyler simply. Gerald looked out the window, lost in memories. Love, something I never fully understood. I demanded that she choose the family or that young man. She chose love, and I, in my wounded pride, expelled her. The old rancher turned to Tyler, his face marked by ancient pain. What no one knows, not even Helen, is that I tried to find her afterward. 6 months after her departure, regret began to consume me. I hired investigators, but it was as if Claire had disappeared from the map. Years later, I discovered she had changed her name, gone, to another state. But you also sent people to make her life difficult, accused Tyler, confused by that contradictory revelation. At the beginning, yes. In the first few months, anger spoke louder. I gave orders that I later regretted. When I finally found her, I learned she had a son. You, Gerald faced the boy. I sent money anonymously, deposited in an account in Josephine's name. She never used it? Tyler looked at the man, surprised. We never knew about any money. I figured. Josephine was always too proud. She probably returned everything without saying a word to Claire. Silence filled the room again. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky in orange hues. Why are you telling me this now? Tyler finally asked. Gerald stood up with some difficulty, approaching an old writing desk. He opened a drawer and removed a yellowed envelope. Because I want you to understand that despite all my mistakes, there was a heart inside this old proud chest, and because I have something that belongs to you. He handed the envelope to Tyler. Inside, the boy found several old photographs. Claire, a beautiful young woman with a luminous smile in various phases of life, a child running through the ranch fields, a teenager mounted on horseback, a young adult at family parties. They're yours, said Gerald, so you can know your mother beyond the stories Josephine tells. Tyler held the photographs with reverence, as if they were fragile treasures. His eyes welled up, seeing the face of the mother he had barely known. Thank you, he murmured, his voice choked. There's one more thing, continued Gerald, returning to the writing desk. He withdrew a small velvet box and handed it to the boy. Your grandmother's engagement ring, my mother's. Claire always admired it as a child. It should have been hers. Tyler opened the box, revealing a delicate gold ring with a small sapphire. Gerald cleared his throat, visibly emotional. I don't expect your forgiveness, boy. I did things and things that can't be undone. But I want you to know that from today on, I recognize you as my great-nephew and legitimate heir of the Morrisons. This ranch will be yours someday, and I hope you'll run it with more wisdom than I did. Silent tears ran down Tyler's face. They weren't tears of sadness or joy, but of understanding. Life wasn't made just of heroes and villains, but of complex people, capable of both great mistakes and acts of redemption. You, my great-uncle, Tyler hesitated, the words forming slowly, can teach me about the ranch, about how everything works. I need to learn. It was Gerald's turn to be surprised. His eyes, normally hard, visibly softened. It would be an honor, Tyler Morrison Johnson. On the veranda of the main house, Helen, Josephine, August, and the ranch workers watched the sunset while they waited. Thunder grazed peacefully nearby, as if also waiting. When Tyler and Gerald finally descended the stairs, side by side, an expectant silence took over the environment. The old rancher seemed different, as if a weight had been removed from his shoulders. I want to officially announce, he said, with a firm voice, that Tyler Morrison Johnson is my great-nephew and legitimate heir to this property. From today on, Horizon Ranch begins a new era, under the administration of my sister Helen, until Tyler reaches legal age. I hope all of you will help him understand and love this land as it deserves to be loved. A spontaneous round of applause erupted among the workers. Josephine hugged her grandson, tears of joy running down her wrinkled face. Helen observed her brother with a mixture of surprise and renewed hope. That night, under the starry sky of Golden Ridge, a simple celebration brought together people who, until a few days ago, lived in completely separate worlds. Music, food, and stories were shared as symbols of a new beginning. Tyler, sitting beside Thunder, contemplated the stars with a full heart. He felt his mother's presence stronger than ever, as if she were there, approving each step of that unexpected journey. "You did it, my child," murmured Josephine, sitting beside him, "not just taming a wild mule, but also transforming hardened hearts." The boy smiled, caressing Thunder's neck. "It wasn't me, Grandma. It was love. The same love that made my mother face everything and everyone for my father. The same love that made you care for me all these years. It's always love that transforms people." Josephine hugged her grandson as they watched Gerald and Helen conversing amicably with the workers. Broken bonds were beginning to be rebuilt. Old wounds were starting their healing process. Horizon Ranch, once known for fear and oppression, now breathed new air, and Tyler knew that wherever she was, his mother was smiling, proud of the son who, with the sensitivity of one who understood the heart of